Hello, Professor. This is my final for client-side web development. My group, we developed an app that employs a Caesar cipher on a input that you put into the website. It is very similar to a well-known website known as rot13.com. Except for our example, we made one that we called SKP10, which skips 10 letters forward in the alphabet for our Caesar cipher. And let's get into it here. So, for our first question, to explain how our team planned, designed, and developed our team project, uh, well, first of all, we had to set up, at the beginning of the group project, we had to set up our code style guide here. This is like a lot of really similar stuff between every format, like HTML, CSS, and JSS, or JavaScript here. We all use 2 or 4 spaces for indentations, and we have to be consistent with each choice. I believe we used 4 for our final one. Proper doc type, declaration, attribute order. We had an order there of class ID, name, source, all href data, and then etc going on. We made sure to use self-closing tags. Comments, we always commented in HTML, at least in this format with the exclamation in the front. For JS, we ended up settling on, if it will show here. For JavaScript, we settled on this style. And then we have a little block down here. And in CSS, we use this style here with the open bracket, close bracket. Other than that, we brainstormed some basic ideas in a group chat, and eventually we ended up coming up with the idea to make something that implemented a Caesar cipher. Because admittedly it would be not too hard, not too ambitious of an idea, but also it allows for some interactivity that we can show off, as well as some of the coding around making the some coding around being able to read the input and make the output and running the algorithm we thought would be interesting to code for. So our HTML is very small amounts actually for our app here, and I could show you why if I go into the project here. We have a very simple app here. We have like 2 headings. We have a container here. We have the something we would label container here. We had the output box here. We have this button selector, and we have these 2 arrows. And that's reflected in how simple that index.html is. So of course we have our doc type declaration, language en, char set, UTF-8, viewport, keywords, author, all the things you would expect. Our favicon here, and we have our link to our SKP10 script and our style sheet. But in the body here, there's not much going on. So our heading just doesn't really have an idea. We only in the CSS later you'll see that we just simply have we only really need one little statement for heading 1, heading 2 in our CSS, and that simply just sets the font and color. Uh, uh, Heading 2 here, though, this does have an ID subtext that does get used later in the CSS, and we have like a nice little character, some interesting unique characters here. We have our subheading. So this no script part right here, what this does is it basically spits out this message right here. Please enable JavaScript to use this page. Only if someone tries to load the HTML or just the app without having scripting enabled. This is, and it gets the class warning. And it counts this paragraph here. So we have our div here, and it gets ID container. This is this orange bit right here. And so this gets input container, and it's that big box. And when you put something in there, it runs this update output function that we will go over in the JavaScript section later. But we also have these two arrow icons, which are part of the big container. And we have our button here. So also includes the output. So container is this part, and this black box here. It's all of that. And all of them are properly given unique IDs, including the text areas being dependent from the box containing the text area. And that's mostly it for the HTML. None too interesting. The only other thing I should mention is that instead of linking to our JavaScript at the end of the body, we actually do it in the head using the defer attribute here. That just makes it that it'll load the JS after all of the HTML elements have been loaded. So going into the CSS, nothing too crazy in here. You can see that the body, which is just this section over here, all this is black. The color on all text out here should be this orange color. And we use the font family Century Gothic. So for the headings, still using Century Gothic, but we have it as a different orange color, and it's text aligned to the center. And we have a little margin down here. That's 20 pixels. So for paragraph, which includes stuff like the arrow and that warning I mentioned earlier, and the text areas inside the input and output containers. For all of those, we set the font size to 16 pixels. And that disappears my cursor if I could finally click on this. We set the line height to 1.5 and margin bottom 10 pixels as well. So the button is an inline block. It has padding here. It also has a background color of orange. It's not really something you really see though. It itself has a color of white, which you do notice here. This little drop down is white right here. Has no border, and the cursor is a pointer when it's hovered over it. So for the container, they should be flex. Their flex direction should be in a column, and all the items are aligned in the center here, like right here. So the arrow, the button, this arrow, these both boxes, they all align in the center. For the input, background color is the background orange. Cursor text makes it so that I get this little text edit cursor right here when I hover over it. And the text decoration color is white. Now for input, output, select, text area, and placeholder, we added some extra padding. And we have also the color white here, text line still center. Output is black, as you can see here, and you actually get no cursor when you hover over it. And the color of the arrows is orange. So yeah, it's like this kind of like funny like Halloween theming. It's meant to seem very underground or edgy. It's just a fun scheming for our project that we wanted. All right. Now, getting into the meat of some of the stuff that we did here. So, the coding. I at least feel like the most interesting part of this project was some of the JavaScript code that we did for this, and I think I personally did not develop this. I did review it. Um, I think a lot of this stuff is pretty cool, and props to Zachary and Ace. I definitely wouldn't have come up with this by myself at this point. I don't think I'm not enough of a JavaScript aficionado. But they did a great job here. So first part we get here is function read input. So we get this if I can click off of it, we get this variable input element, which essentially here will read the text in input and turn it into a string. And then we have var input value, which takes this value that we read here, and this function returns input value. Simple so far. Function write output has the argument output value here, and for our variable output element, this will read the output, and it makes it that output value here equals output element, or yeah, output element dot inner HTML will equal the output value argument here. So update output, function update output, which we mentioned earlier in our, I believe it was the HTML here. Yes, so on input in our input container here, which is our text area, it will run update output. Update output calls SKP algorithm. So SKP algorithm is where most of the magic here happens. So SKP algorithm takes in input value, which we know from up here. That's the input that we read from the text area. So first thing it does, it checks to make sure the input value actually has something. If not, it sends an alert that says, please enter a message to encrypt. We can test this right now, where if I type something like this, and then I try to delete it, it sends me this alert right here. Please enter a message to encrypt. And this right here initializes this variable encrypted result, which we use later on inside of this function. This just initializes it at the beginning here. All right, so here's the interesting part. We iterate through each character that we see in the input value string. And we can see that with this for loop for as long as there are still characters. Current character is going to be input value I in this array here. So it runs this if statement. If current character matches these characters in the alphabet, which is A to Z, capital A to capital Z, it determines the case of the letter. It converts the letter to its ASCII code, which is what we would use to actually convert the text on the app, and it applies the shift 10 positions to the right. So it checks if it's uppercase. So if it's an uppercase code, then it will run, it'll do car code minus 65 plus 10, mod 26 plus 65. This is because the ASCII code for uppercase letter A is 65. It starts there. We can see here if it doesn't do that, then it's going to assume that it's a lowercase letter, as long as it is a letter and not a special character or number. And it'll start at 97 here, and very similar to here, because lowercase a is at 97. So next thing it does is it makes it so that var encrypted char, encrypted character, will equal a string, excuse me, from our character code here. It'll turn character code back into a string that we can actually use. And then here, it will make it so that uppercase letters will be set back to uppercase and lowercase letters will be lowercase again. And then it'll write the encrypted result to the output, which we will get back in this text box. And you notice a little glitch here. So if I set it to this, it will bring us 10 letters forward in the alphabet here. All right, next. So frameworks and libraries. We use the basic Java. We use the basic libraries that we had here. So there's we added no extra libraries to our app. We like if you look in the HTML here, we only had this script here. We don't really have any extra libraries that we used. We just did all of this stuff by hand. I imagine with some help from online resources. So debugging this. Yeah, the reviewers on this project had to basically just test to make sure that stuff translated properly in the Caesar cipher. They obviously the easiest way to do that was to go use rot13.com because the little drop down menu in their center right here, they have everything from I think ROT1 to ROT25. Like it's very comprehensive. You can very easily test that out. We you can notice even looking at this video that there's an interesting glitch where this doesn't properly delete. We weren't really able to figure that one out in time, as well as any database implementation. But otherwise, we tested to make sure that this part definitely worked. We wanted to make sure that the main part of the app actually worked properly. I believe that's everything for the final. Thank you for this semester, Professor. It's been fun. I want to meet the 20-minute time limit, so I think I will stop my video here. Thanks for everything, Professor.